That Monday morning started out perfectly ordinary. I walked into NorthPeak Dynamics, the building I had given nearly 2 decades of my life to, carrying the system patch I had spent all weekend fixing. For years, I had been the first one in, but today something felt different. The whole place was too quiet, like the entire company was holding its breath for something it already knew was coming. I was 42, old enough to recognize when a storm was waiting on the other side of a door. I just did not expect that storm to have a name. Graham Voss. When I stepped into the third floor conference room, the entire executive board was already seated. The air was so cold I could hear the hum of the AC. They rarely started without me, since almost every meeting needed my technical report. I paused for a second when I saw how tight their faces were, then kept walking toward my seat. I had not even pulled out my chair when Graham, North Peak's 33-year-old CEO, spoke. His voice was sharp and fast, like he had practiced it in front of a mirror. Elena, we are keeping this meeting brief. I stood still, one hand gripping the packet of documents. Graham leaned back, fingers laced, looking like he was about to announce a great victory. But to me, it felt more like watching a planned collision unfold. Today, the company is announcing a restructuring. We are shifting to a more dynamic, younger model. Some of the old roles will no longer be a fit. I heard every word, slow and precise, but inside I felt a strange emptiness. Graham glanced at me with a flicker of something that looked almost like excitement. And as of this moment, your position at NorthPeak Dynamics is terminated, effective immediately. Someone exhaled sharply, then silence dropped over the room like heavy snow. I looked around the table. Not a single person lifted their head. Not one. The same people who had begged me to save projects, who depended on me every time the system crashed, now stared at papers, pens, anything except me. Even Lily avoided my eyes. The same Lily I had stayed late for, night after night. The one who used to shake so much before her first big briefing that I had to steady her hands. Now she sat beside Graham, spine straight, wearing a thin, practiced smile. I was not shocked. Not entirely. For months, Graham had been preaching about fresh talent, new directions, and modern tech. He spoke with the confidence of someone who believed he was in full control. He had no idea how wrong he was. On the table, Graham slid a white envelope toward me. On behalf of leadership, we appreciate your contributions. HR will assist you with the offboarding process this morning. I looked at the envelope the way you look at an object that does not belong in your world. I had spent 17 years building NorthPeak's operational backbone. Every line of code, every system structure, every protective layer. I had been there back when the company worked out of a rundown, leased office when a single small error could have taken the whole thing down. But what kept me rooted was not humiliation. It was the truth they did not know. I had known this day was coming, down to the exact timing, and I knew they were touching something far more dangerous than they understood. AstraCore, the system NorthPeak relied on every minute, did not belong to the company. It belonged to me. Registered under my own firm, Carter Group LLC. Buried deep beneath every proud process they bragged about, AstraCore had a defense protocol that triggered. The moment my access was revoked improperly, they did not know that. They thought they had just erased a name on an org chart. I set the envelope down gently, straightened my spine, and looked directly at Graham. My calmness made a few people shift in their seats, as if my silence carried more weight than a scream ever could. I understand, I said. No tremble, no anger, just a technical acknowledgement of a technical fact. Graham blinked, thrown off. Maybe he had expected outrage or collapse, something to reassure him that his authority mattered. I did not give him that. I placed my access badge in the center of the glass table. For a brief second, I looked at the hands that had built every foundation NorthPeak ran on. Then I turned, not glancing at Lily, not at any of them. I walked straight out of the room. As the door closed behind me, I heard someone let out a small, shaky breath. Maybe they thought I was about to break. But that was when I smiled. Not out of joy, but certainty. I knew exactly what had just begun. Not an ending. A chain reaction they could not even imagine. Inside the elevator, the cold of the steel handrail seeped into my palm. I inhaled slowly, letting the hum of the elevator wash through me, dissolving whatever stray emotions still clung to the edges. No fear, no resentment, just the steady calm of someone who knows the architecture she built and knows the company is stepping into a game where they do not hold the pieces. The elevator doors slid open. Light from the main lobby swept across my face. I walked out like someone leaving a storm behind, someone who had remembered to bring a raincoat long before the clouds rolled in. AstraCore had already started its countdown. When I stepped out of NorthPeak Dynamics, I did not feel the shock people expect a 42-year-old woman to feel after being fired in front of an entire room. What hit me first was the cool Seattle morning air. It cleared my mind faster than Graham's final words ever could. I walked slowly toward the parking lot, feeling as if I was leaving a house that had finally collapsed. In truth, it was just an empty shell I had been holding up for far too long. When I reached my car and touched the door handle, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A notification flashed across the screen from AstraCore. The defense protocol has been activated. I held the phone for a few seconds before slipping it back into my pocket. That protocol was not built to destroy, it was built to disrupt, to drift things off course, just enough that people who did not understand the system would start to feel the instability. A small ripple in the heartbeat of the entire operation. When a company relies only on gloss without understanding the foundation, even the smallest shift can make the whole structure tremble. I started the engine and drove home. The familiar road, lined with trees wet from morning mist, felt oddly peaceful and distant at the same time. I turned off the radio so the silence could settle around me. Whenever my mind emptied, memories always came rushing back. I remembered when I was first hired at NorthPeak 17 years ago. The company had been a mess then, weak and close to collapse. I had been young, thin, ambitious, and I trusted systems more than people. I built AstraCore not for recognition, but to save a framework that was leaking from every seam. I had kept it as independent code, completely separate from the assets the grown company later claimed. They used it every day, yet none of them understood it, not even Lily, the one I once trained with everything I had. When I parked in front of my apartment, the rain had begun to fall lightly. I hung up my coat, sat on the sofa, and opened my laptop. The AstraCore dashboard lit up, familiar as breathing. Log lines scrolled steadily. Processing drift detected, restore points regenerating, invalid requests denied. The defense protocol was working perfectly. I closed the laptop. There was nothing else I needed to do. The system knew how to protect itself. What troubled me was not the technical side, but the people. Lily, who once followed me like a shadow, now stood behind Graham as if she had never owed anyone anything. She had been eager, sincere, always asking questions, always learning. But the moment Graham arrived, with the confidence of someone young who had never truly failed, Lily began to change. Her silence in the meeting hurt more than anything Graham said. My phone buzzed again. I checked it. A message from Mark Rowland, the former operations director, the man who had worked beside me for years before retiring. Just 3 words. Are you all right? I replied, I am fine. Do not worry. His answer came almost instantly. Be careful with Graham. He has always wanted to erase the old guard. I held the phone for a long moment. I knew that. Graham did not just want to restructure, he wanted to rewrite the company's history without a trace of those who built it. I was the easiest piece to remove, or so he thought. I stood, made a cup of mint tea, and let the warm scent fill the room. But the brief calm was shattered when a strange email appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, about Graham's plan. I opened it. Just a few short lines. No name. Graham is telling the board that your system is blocking the upgrade process. They plan to present it as a design flaw to justify replacing you, just so you know. I sat up straight. I was not shocked. I simply saw the path they had chosen more clearly. They did not just want me gone. They wanted to erase the value of everything I had built. I took a slow breath and opened AstraCore again. I enabled the advanced observation mode. Any unauthorized access attempt would be recorded instantly. And when they tried to touch the core, they would understand. The person they pushed out was the last one holding the system together. I stayed seated, watching the screen glow and dim. A plan formed, one not for revenge, but for truth. A plan to protect what was real. NorthPeak thought they had ended a career, but what they had done was open the door to a chapter I should have stepped into long ago. The next part would be the moment they finally felt the weight of their arrogance. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Seattle sat under its familiar blanket of gray clouds, but my mind was strangely clear. I made a cup of coffee, sat down at my desk, and opened AstraCore again. The defense protocol was still running, but not at a level they would fully feel yet. Just a few minor shifts, enough to make the inexperience uneasy. I checked the access log and saw the first entry of the day, a login attempt from an unregistered server. The username was masked, but the type of query was painfully familiar. I tilted my head, studying the code string on the screen. Even with the format altered, I recognized it. Graham had set his new systems team loose on the intermediary layer of AstraCore. I took a sip of coffee. They would not find anything there. The intermediary layer was just a mask, a way to make the system look like a standard architecture. The real core lived in a different tier, one I had never shared. I locked the screen, got dressed, and left the apartment. Not to interfere, to observe. I went to a coffee shop near Lake Union, the kind full of tech workers. Laptops open on every table, quiet conversations humming at a frequency I knew by heart. I took a seat by the window, set my laptop down, and pulled up the remote dashboard. I was not lurking. I was watching a sequence I had already mapped out. From the start of the workday, NorthPeak's systems began to slow. First, it was email authentication. I watched the notification queue delay by 5 seconds, then 8, just enough to irritate people trying to send their morning reports. Then the sales data dashboard slipped out of sync. Not a full outage, just misalignment. But for the commercial team, that misalignment was a hole in the side of their day. My guess was they would blame an internal server glitch or a network issue. New people always do. About an hour later, another abnormal access attempt appeared. This time, I recognized the identifier. Lily. She was trying to open the bridge directory, the cluster of segmented data I had once explained to her in detail. That directory had been designed to distribute load when the system was under stress. But if you touched it the wrong way, it responded with nothing but empty shells. AstraCore rejected Lily's request. I watched the message appear. Request suspended due to missing link authority. I could picture her sitting in front of the screen, fighting down panic, trying to look confident in front of the young engineers. I had seen that scene before, back when I was the one standing behind her. This time, she would have to stand on her own. I took another sip of coffee, not out of satisfaction, simply because I understood how this worked. When people forget the roots, the system reminds them in its own language. While I was watching the dashboard, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Can we meet? It is about NorthPeak. I frowned. The message included a name, Elena Torres. I remembered it. She was an internal auditor, the kind who specializes in risks that leadership likes to step around. I had worked with her a few times, sharp, careful, and not easily moved by internal politics. I replied with one word, when. She answered, in 1 hour. I will send the location. I closed the laptop, left the coffee shop, and walked to the address she sent. It was a quiet, used bookstore. When I arrived, Hannah was sitting at the back table, hands wrapped around a cup of hot coffee. She looked at me with a mix of guilt and tension. Thank you for coming, she said. I pulled out a chair. What is this about? Hannah slid an envelope across the table. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a presentation deck. I recognized the author immediately, Graham. The title line kept me silent for a few seconds. Root cause of operational failures, legacy architecture incompatible with modern standards. Hannah lowered her voice. He is planning to blame everything on you at the board meeting on Friday. I turned a few pages. Every slide twisted the description of the system, branding security features as design flaws. Every argument pointed toward the same conclusion, that firing me had been necessary for the company to evolve. I narrowed my eyes. His goal. Hannah met my gaze. He wants full control over the new architecture. He does not want anyone else credited for the foundation that came before. I exhaled slowly. Graham was following exactly the path I expected, but he still did not understand the most important part. AstraCore cannot operate under the hand of someone who does not understand it, and it had already started to push back. When I left the bookstore, I pulled up the dashboard again. The third security layer of AstraCore was flagging a pattern of repeated queries. They were trying to open the core map. A new hire could not do that. An old one might not manage it either. But they were still trying because Graham wanted to see the weak points. I stood on the sidewalk watching my phone screen glow under the thin afternoon mist. A string of fresh alerts appeared, one after another. Unauthorized deep access detected. Attempted modification of navigation keys recorded. Secondary shield generated automatically. Integrity level remains within a safe threshold. I narrowed my eyes. I knew what I had to do next, not to fight them, to protect everything I had built with half a lifetime of work. I opened the command menu. The advanced monitoring options slid into view. I chose what I needed: full spectrum oversight, block harmful responses, log every shred of evidence. AstraCore confirmed the request. A faint streak of blue swept across the screen and vanished. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked on through the mix of traffic noise and light rain. This was not retaliation. This was the first step in a truth they would have to face, and I knew what was coming would not be easy for them. They had pushed me out of my own story, but they forgot one thing. No matter how complex a system is, it still reflects the person who built it, and I had never disappeared. The next day, when I opened my eyes, Seattle was covered in a thick layer of fog again. But unlike the gloomy mornings I had known for years, the air today felt like it was waiting for something to happen. I made my coffee, sat at my desk, and opened the AstraCore dashboard. A cluster of red alerts blinked immediately. I knew this moment would come, but I had not expected them to touch the system this soon. The first line appeared: high-level access initiated from the conversion team, core layer receiving abnormal pings. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand as I read the stream. This was not simple probing. Someone was trying to open the core pathways, the segment that held identity structures and link algorithms. AstraCore had already blocked it, but something else caught my attention. The style of the query was methodical, experienced, not reckless. I checked the identifier: Felix Ramirez, one of the young engineers Graham had recently hired. I muttered to myself. He was not as clueless as the others, but he would still fail. Not because he lacked skill, but because the core of AstraCore was designed to read intent before it read commands. Anyone who touched it without understanding its philosophy would be pushed out before they even reached the first gate. I let the system handle itself and got ready to leave the house. I needed to meet Mark today, not to complain, but to confirm what he knew about Graham. We had agreed on a small diner near Fremont. When I arrived, Mark was already there, hands clasped, face heavy with worry. The moment I sat down, he spoke. "Graham is in serious trouble, Elena." I raised a brow. It came faster than I expected. He sighed. "The entire operations department is reporting unusual delays. Internal finance is showing mismatched numbers. Sales cannot load customer data. They have no idea what is happening, and they are blaming the old team." I waited for the next part. "But no one from the old team is there anymore to fix it," Mark said quietly. I looked at him, neither smiling nor reacting. "Mark knew me too well," he added. "I know this is not you breaking anything. I worked with you for 15 years. I know how you protect what you build, but Graham does not believe that." I looked out the window. Rain clung to the glass like wet leaves pinned by the wind. Mark paused, then said, "They are preparing an emergency meeting this afternoon. I heard Graham wants to propose wiping the entire legacy layer and rebuilding from scratch." I turned to him at once. "That is suicide. They do not understand that AstraCore is the only thing keeping their data balanced. If they remove that layer without a compatible replacement, the whole system will collapse within hours." Mark nodded. "I know, but Graham does not listen to anyone." I stayed silent for a long time, not out of worry, out of calculation. After meeting him, I returned home and opened the dashboard again. The advanced observation layer was logging a flood of consecutive access attempts. Notifications rolled in like waves. More and more people were trying to open the foundation layer and were being rejected. AstraCore handled each attempt with cold precision. Then another alert appeared. This one was different. Administrative level query detected. Signal from the executive sector. I tapped into the details. The requester, Graham Adler. He was trying to bypass the link firewall using a top-level management key. I inhaled slowly. His action was not curiosity. It was desperation. He believed authority could force the core open. But AstraCore had never been built to respond to authority. Only logic. Only integrity. Graham tried 3 times. All 3 were blocked. But the 4th attempt made me sit up straight. He had attempted to delete the auxiliary connection string, something no one should ever do while the system was under load. If it had not been blocked, it would have scrambled the entire data structure within minutes. AstraCore reacted instantly. It built a secondary shield, shifted all access into a virtualized mode, and projected a simulated response system to mislead the user. I watched the sequence unfold without interfering, not because I wanted them deceived, but because it was the only way to keep them from destroying the company they were trying so hard to claim. An hour later, an email arrived from someone I never expected. Lily, do you have time? I need to talk. I stared at the line for a moment, then replied, 1 hour. We met at a small downtown park. When I arrived, Lily was already there, uneasy, shame flickering on her face. I recognized it instantly. She was standing in front of her own truth. I am sorry, she blurted the moment I reached her. I never thought it would get like this. I crossed my arms. What do you want to talk about? She swallowed hard. Graham is losing control. The system is malfunctioning everywhere. The investors are panicking. And, she hesitated. And I think the problem is in the layer you built. I looked at the woman who had once been the first person I took under my wing. I was not angry. I felt what any mentor feels when they see a student pulled into the games of power. I asked, what do you need? Lily drew a breath. I need you to help me understand what is happening. I did not tell Graham. I do not want everything to explode. I stood still. In the distance, children were running, their laughter mixing with the wind pushing across the lake. I said slowly, the system does not break itself. It defends itself. When someone forces it the wrong way, it stops cooperating. Lily looked at me, fear and understanding tangled in her eyes. Then I said the one thing I knew would change everything. If you really want to save the company, you must be willing to stand against Graham. Not for me. For the truth. Lily tightened her hands. I know. And that is why I came to you. The wind picked up. Something was shifting, not in AstraCore, but in the people around it. When I left the park, I opened the dashboard again. A surge of rejected queries filled the screen. They were touching parts they should never touch. NorthPeak still had no idea that the worst had not happened yet, and I knew this time I would not stay on the outside. That night, I did not turn on the lights in my living room. Only the glow of my laptop lit the space, making the silence feel even heavier. I reopened the AstraCore dashboard and watched the abnormal logs stream across the screen. The market response layer was delayed by 7 minutes. Financial queries had been blocked twice. Internal security alerts were appearing with relentless frequency. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had predicted, only faster than I expected. I scrolled to the end of the list and paused at a new entry. Attempt to open inter-server communication gate. Requester, Graham Adler. He was trying to open an external link path, something only used under extreme emergency protocols. I narrowed my eyes. They were sliding off the edge, and Graham was scrambling for any way to keep control before everyone realized he did not understand the system he was trying to claim. I stood, poured a glass of water, and returned to my desk. I did not intervene. Not yet. I wanted to see how far they would go before they were forced to admit responsibility for the chaos. AstraCore continued to run its simulated layers, giving them the illusion that their commands were working, though everything they were touching was only a mirrored shell. An hour later, an email from Mark appeared. Emergency meeting, 3 o'clock. Topic: System crisis. Graham wants all leadership present. They want to call you in. You should prepare. I exhaled quietly. Things were accelerating, and it was finally time to step into the storm. At exactly 3 o'clock, I arrived at NorthPeak. People who passed me in the hallway stared with expressions I could not quite label. A hint of fear, a flicker of respect, and something like confusion. I knew they had all seen the video from last week's presentation, Savannah politely but coldly asking me to leave the room. And now, with the system failing in ways no one could explain, those same eyes followed me with a new understanding, as if pieces were finally falling into place. I walked into the main conference room. The entire leadership team was there. Error charts flashed in red across the screen. Graham sat at the head of the table, face tense as he struggled to hold his composure. Savannah clutched her tablet, scrolling in restless bursts. Mark sat nearby, concern etched across his features, but he gave me a small, steady nod. Graham looked at me like he was trying to measure exactly how much I knew and how much I could prove. "Let's begin," he said, attempting calm. "The system has been malfunctioning for the last 24 hours. Our financial workflow and customer data pipelines are out of sync. The conversion team believes the cause is in the legacy architecture. Legacy architecture." He did not say my name, but everyone in the room knew what part of the system that meant. I folded my arms. "Why do you think that?" Graham pressed his lips together. "Because you are the only one who has ever had full access to it." The room tightened, the air pulled thin. I held his gaze. "If the system is failing, it is not the architecture. It is the people touching the architecture without understanding it." Savannah flushed, but stayed silent. I knew she was thinking of the unauthorized queries she believed no one noticed. AstraCore logged everything, even the things people thought they could hide. I looked around the room, every face turned toward me, half anxious, half hopeful. I said, "Let me ask a question. In the past 36 hours, which one of you attempted to alter the core data transmission routes?" No one lifted a hand, but two people flinched. I continued and attempted to access the reflection layer without a routing key. Graham's head snapped up. Savannah's eyes fell immediately. I knew exactly who those answers belonged to. I inhaled slowly, letting the weight settle. "You are trying to fix a system you do not understand. The system is not broken. It is protecting itself from destructive administrative level commands." Graham shot to his feet. "Destructive. You are accusing us of sabotaging our own company's system." I replied, "No. I am describing the behavior. Motive is for the board to decide." Graham's mouth opened, but Mark cut in. "We need to hear Elena out. She is the only person in the room who fully understands the system." The room split instantly, half leaned toward me, half toward Graham. Savannah stood, finding a fragile thread of courage. "I have something to say." Every head turned to her. She glanced at me, then at Graham. "The issue is not Elena. The foundation layer does not generate any errors on its own. I checked it. The issue came from our interference in the auxiliary layer, the one Elena never transferred because it was not part of the conversion scope. It sounded more like a confession than a report. I was not surprised. Lily had already shown signs of guilt when she met with me. Graham stared at her like she had betrayed him. I straightened, facing the room. "If you want me to restore this system, I need three things. 1. Complete access for 24 hours with no secondary queries interfering. 2. Full operation logs from the last 48 hours. 3. An immediate replacement of the project lead." Silence clamped down. They all knew exactly who the third condition pointed to. Graham slammed his hand on the table. "Absolutely not. What are you trying to pull?" I looked at him, steady. "I am trying to save this company from your arrogance." Before he could reply, the conference room doors swung open. A senior board member stepped inside, face tight with urgency. He placed a file on the table. "We have reviewed the system reports and we have reviewed the unauthorized access logs." He turned toward Graham. "And we fully agree with Elena's requirements." Graham froze. Savannah lowered her head. Mark exhaled with relief. The board member continued. "Graham Adler, you will temporarily step away from your technical leadership duties until the restoration process is complete." I stayed still. Not triumphant, not vindictive. The room fell into a deep silence. The only person who broke it was the board member. "Elena, can you begin now?" I nodded. I knew this moment was only the beginning. The real confrontation still waited ahead. I went back to the operations center right after leaving the board meeting. Even after months away from this place, the familiar hum of the system brought back a feeling I had only ever known here: responsibility and control. The large screens were filled with red alerts, showing that AstraCore was being stretched to its limits. Savannah stood in the corner, holding her tablet like a shield. She did not dare walk toward me, though it was clear she wanted to say something. Mark stayed close behind me and signaled for everyone to step back. He asked, "Can you restore the system in 24 hours? If everyone leaves me alone to work," I said. I sat in the central chair and opened the core layer dashboard. Lines of code appeared, most of them structures I had written years ago, back when NorthPeak was small, chaotic, and barely held together. I could feel the exhaustion in the system, like it was trying to survive but no longer had the strength. Before I could type a command, a pop-up window appeared. Someone had just sent a query from outside the network using a routing trick that told me immediately it was not an internal employee. Mark frowned. I already blocked all external access. I opened the tracking panel. The query had slipped through by using an internal account as a relay. When I saw the name, I exhaled. Aaron Blake. The young engineer is desperate to prove himself, and far too easy for Graham to manipulate him. Mark understood and walked off to deal with it. I turned back to my work. I authenticated through biometrics and gained full access to the core. AstraCore displayed a welcome line, small, but enough to remind me that the system still recognized me as the only person with real authority over it. I launched the initial recovery commands. Transaction links reestablished. Routing layer cleared of conflicts. Interregional reflection layer removed from the simulation module. The financial management tier began to steady its processing rhythm. Everything was falling back into place. But as I dug deeper, I found an unfamiliar module buried in the analytics layer. It was not mine. The code was sloppy, untested, and generating chain conflicts. I opened the edit history. The author, Graham Adler. Savannah saw me stop and spoke quietly. He forced us to deploy that module. None of us was allowed to refuse. I typed the command to delete it. Immediately, half the alerts vanished. Processing speed jumped. I knew I was on the right track. About an hour and a half later, when most of the restoration was nearly complete, the operations center door burst open. A security officer stepped in, speaking fast. "Elena, something is happening downstairs. Graham is gathering people to protest the board's decision. He is saying you caused the chaos." Savannah went pale. Mark looked irritated but not surprised. I stood up. "I am going down there. No one gets to weaponize the chaos he created and pin it on me." Mark moved as if to stop me, but I said simply, "I have hidden long enough." We headed straight to the lobby. The atmosphere was completely different. Employees stood in tense groups, whispering, anxious. In the center of the room, standing on a small platform, Graham held up documents like evidence. "We are being sabotaged," he declared loudly. "And the only person with deep access recently is Elena Torres. She was fired, yet she continues interfering with our system." Hearing my name, I stepped forward. The entire lobby fell silent, as if the air had been pulled out. I said clearly, "If you want to assign blame, at least be accurate. The system collapsed because of the untested module you inserted, and the unauthorized access in the past 2 days came from the consulting team you hired. I have restored AstraCore under the board's authority. There is no sabotage, only your mistakes." Someone in the crowd gasped. "Is that true?" I looked directly at Graham. "Would you like me to display every edit log and access record linked to you for everyone here to see?" His face drained of color. He tried to force a smile. "She is manipulating the narrative. She is covering her tracks." Mark stepped forward. "Enough. The board has verified every piece of data. Elena is the one saving the system." A few employees leaned toward each other, whispering. The energy shifted. People who were once uncertain were now looking at Graham with suspicion. A young engineer near the entrance raised his voice. "I saw the errors coming from the module you pushed. Elena is fixing them. I watched it from the operations room." His words cracked the fragile pyramid of authority Graham was trying to rebuild. Graham glared at me with open hostility. "You think you have won," I answered, calm and steady. "I do not want to win. I want the truth to stop being twisted." I turned away, leaving behind the fading noise of a crowd that no longer believed him. I still had one final step to complete in the restoration of AstraCore, and I knew this much: Graham would not give up. But he had already lost the one thing that held his power together: people's trust. and once that collapses, the rest of his authority follows. I walked up the stairs, feeling the storm shift direction around me. I returned to the operations center after leaving the lobby. No one said a word, but their eyes were different. Doubt had shifted into cautious belief. I knew North Peak was far from saved, but at least I had pulled everyone back toward the truth. I sat in the control chair. The AstraCore interface lit up, showing stability levels rising, though deep layer warnings still flashed in red. I got to work immediately, unlocking modules that had been forcibly shut down during Graham's attempt to prove the system had failed because of me. Mark stepped forward and set a folder beside the console. Graham is stirring things up with the legal team. Looks like he is preparing new accusations. Are you sure you want to keep going? I answered. The more chaos he creates, the more I have to clean up. Otherwise, the system will collapse for real. As I reviewed the logs, a stream of unusual alerts appeared, clusters of unauthorized access attempts with no identifiers, scanning each security layer in sequence. The pattern was not coming from any internal employee. There was something familiar about the rhythm, the signature of someone I once knew. Savannah frowned. Did Graham hire someone? I opened the deeper firewall layer. The pattern became clear. I recognized it instantly. It was the scan signature of Drayton Hayes, the security specialist who once worked at NorthPeak before leaving in a cloud of questionable contract dealings. Of all the people who had ever doubted AstraCore, Hayes had come the closest. He was smart, disciplined, and most importantly, patient enough to dig to the core if someone paid him well enough. Mark swore under his breath. Great. Graham brought back exactly the one person we never wanted involved. I calmly opened the shield protocol. AstraCore instantly generated hundreds of decoy routes, pulling the intruder into a digital maze. Hayes reacted fast. He recognized the fake pathways, rejected them, rerouted through the auxiliary channel, then looped into the prediction layer. He clearly understood my design habits. AstraCore reported pseudo-layer infiltration successful. The trap had sprung exactly as intended. I activated another misdirection module. Hayes continued diving deeper, convinced he was approaching the core. 10 minutes passed. His scan slowed, then stopped entirely. A message suddenly appeared across the interface. We meet again, Elena. Savannah gasped. He is talking to you. I did not answer. I simply closed the window. Hayes sent another message. I am not here to break the system. I just want to verify whether what Graham said is true. Show me the core layer. I locked the response channel. I was not about to let someone like Hayes touch AstraCore, even if he had been one of the few I respected technically. Hayes did not give up. He attempted to open a shadow session. I blocked it. He switched ports. I blocked that too. A quiet technical duel unfolded. No words, just two familiar minds predicting each other's moves. Stood beside me, voice low. Should I alert the board? I shook my head. Reporting it now would only give Graham a way to redirect the story. I need clearer proof. I activated the tag protocol, a trace mechanism. If Hayes kept going, AstraCore would stamp every access attempt and track the exact device he was using. 5 minutes later, the report appeared. Hayes's device was routing through NorthPeak's internal secure network, meaning Graham had given him an access password. Savannah's eyes widened. He really let an outsider into the restricted tier. I stood up. I need to see the board right now. I have enough proof to show exactly who has been sabotaging the system. Mark nodded. Go. We will keep things steady here. I left the operations center, walking through the white hallway where every light felt like it was watching me. Behind me, the keyboards, alerts, and quiet tension softened into the distance, but I knew they trusted me now. For the first time in months, I felt that North Peak was not just a place I used to work. It was something I had to protect to prove the worth of the truth itself. When I reached the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished steel. No longer the woman humiliated in front of a crowd, no longer the one replaced, no longer the one dismissed as a relic of an old era. I saw the version of myself from years ago, back when I still believed technology could save any system as long as the person running it was honest. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. This time, I was not going to rescue them. I was going to expose the truth they tried to bury. And as the doors slid shut, I knew with absolute clarity Graham had crossed the final line I was willing to tolerate. From here on, he would not be the one deciding what happened next. I stepped out of the elevator onto the 12th floor, where the executive board usually met. The hallway was so quiet that the sound of my shoes hitting the floor felt like an announcement of what was about to happen. I no longer felt nervous or angry. Everything inside me had hardened into something cold and precise, like metal in a surgeon's hand. Today, I was not here to defend myself. I was here to end this. The conference room door was slightly open, and I could hear a tense debate inside. When I walked in, every head turned toward me. Linda looked startled to see me so early, ahead of the scheduled afternoon meeting. Frank stood beside the digital board, red performance graphs glowing behind him. And Graham was attempting to hide his irritation beneath a thin, unwilling smile. Linda asked Elena directly, "Why are you here? We still have a meeting this afternoon." I answered calmly, "I am here because the system is facing an external intrusion, and because the person responsible was granted internal access by someone inside North Peak." The room fell silent. Graham crossed his arms. More accusations with no proof. I placed a USB drive on the table. I do not like accusing people without certainty, but this time I have complete proof. You will find it in the report. The outside contractor you brought in used an internal password to reach the second tier of AstraCore. Linda looked at Graham. "You brought in an outside specialist without notifying us?" Graham exhaled heavily, feigning insult. "I was racing against time. We have a system emergency, and I did what was necessary to protect the company. And I did not hire a hacker. I requested help from an independent auditor." I held his gaze. "You say auditor. I know him too. And he was not auditing. He was trying to force a path into the core. At the same time, you sent a legal warning accusing me of causing the failures. If I had not checked the logs myself, the board would have believed I sabotaged AstraCore." Frank opened the file. The trace reports appeared on the large screen in crisp detail: the IP trails, the unauthorized access attempts, and the internal authentication key tied directly to Graham's account. 5 seconds of heavy silence passed before Frank turned to him. "Graham, explain." I saw the slight flicker in Graham's eyes. Just a moment, but enough to know he had not expected me to intercept Hayes and analyze the trail this quickly. Graham spoke slowly. "Maybe my account was compromised. We cannot rule out the possibility that someone forged these logs. Elena, as a former engineer, had enough access to fabricate anything she wanted." I switched to another display. No need to argue. I traced the signal back to the original device. "The laptop is in your auxiliary office, East Wing. If necessary, I can show the live data stream coming from that machine." Linda's expression hardened for the first time. "Graham, is that true?" His face tightened, the panic starting to surface. He tried to redirect. "Elena is manipulating this. She still has not proven that she is not behind the recent system failures." I did not address him. Instead, I projected the consolidated logs AstraCore had compiled earlier that morning. Every unauthorized test tier, access Graham made, every call between him and Hayes, every request to unlock restricted layers, all recorded, all undeniable. The room thickened with a slow, heavy silence. Frank braced his hands against the table. "Elena, what do you want the board to do?" I drew a deep breath. I am not here to take revenge or humiliate anyone. I am here to do two things. First, protect AstraCore from being corrupted by people who do not understand it. Second, make sure North Peak does not fall back into chaos again. Linda asked, "Specifically?" I met her eyes. "I want temporary control of the entire system for 48 hours to stabilize AstraCore. If we do not, the active conflicts will chain together into a far more severe failure. I also want the board to open an independent investigation into Graham's actions." Graham shot to his feet. "This is a setup. She is turning herself into a hero by orchestrating the failure. How do we know AstraCore is not the weapon she is using to threaten this company?" I sat back, steady. "If I wanted to destroy the company, North Peak would have collapsed 6 hours ago, when you let Hayes into the core tier. I did not. I protected it. If none of you believe that, I can hand over control right now and leave quietly. But remember, no one in this room knows how to resolve AstraCore's newest conflict chain except me." The room fell silent again. deeper and heavier. Linda finally spoke. "I propose we vote now." I stood still, saying nothing. As the hands went up, I counted 6 votes in favor, 2 against, and 1 abstention. Linda announced, "Elena will temporarily lead the stabilization effort for the next 48 hours. As for Graham, you will be suspended until the investigation is complete." Graham's mouth fell open, stunned that the board had actually sided with me. I collected the USB without ever looking at him. This decision was not a victory. It was simply the step required to stop the chaos. When I stepped out of the conference room, I knew this was not over. Graham was not the kind of person to step back quietly. But this time, he no longer had the power to make a mess. Authority had shifted, and I needed to race against time to save AstraCore before it fractured under the damage it had already done. One final confrontation awaited. I left the boardroom feeling as if I had just walked out of a storm. Not relieved, but suspended in that quiet space after everything has been torn apart, leaving the ground bare and cold. The 12th floor hallway was silent, the steady hum of the ventilation system the only sound, yet each of my footsteps echoed like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what came next. 48 hours. I had 48 hours to regain full control of AstraCore before the chain of failures Graham triggered reached the core. In a system that survives on stability, a single wrong intervention can turn into a brutal domino. I headed straight to the central operations room. When the doors opened, the entire engineering team looked up at me, their faces a mix of confusion and hope. They had witnessed chaos unfold all week, and rumors had spread faster than the patch notes. They knew I had been called back, but not why. I opened the monitoring server and connected directly to AstraCore. Layers of red alerts pulsed across the screen like the system was gasping for breath. A young engineer named Nolan asked, "Where do we start?" I answered clearly, "From the root. No one touches any process for the next 4 hours. I need full access and every raw log from the last 7 days. No pushback, no hesitation." They knew I was the only person who understood how deeply AstraCore was built. I put on my headset, opened the core algorithm file, and did what I had always done best. Listened to the system through the intuition I had shaped over 15 years. The errors stacked like blocked arteries. Graham had not only brought in an outsider at the worst possible moment, he had also tampered with test gateways that were never meant for anyone unfamiliar with them. That pushed AstraCore into constant defensive mode, creating a long chain of conflicts. It took me almost 2 hours to manually unwind each knot. When I found the final corrupted layer, I realized that if Graham had sent one more command, AstraCore would have forced the entire system into disconnect mode to protect the data. That would have shut NorthPeak down for days. I restored the sync rhythm, aligned the algorithm with its original processing loop, and slowly the last warning dissolved. The screen faded to a stable green. Nolan let out a breath, but I simply lowered my headset, expression neutral. I knew this was only half the work. That night, I returned to my apartment. As I opened the door, it felt like I was leaving behind a chapter long overdue for closure. I turned on the light and saw the box of old documents I had carried from Horizon Dynamics. Sketches, notes, the early blueprints of AstraCore I had poured half my life into. Even though I had saved NorthPeak from immediate collapse, I understood a simple truth. This place would never be where I belonged again. A system needs people who respect it, not people who use it as a weapon. I opened my email. A new message from Ava Lane, young CEO I had once mentored back when she was still an engineer. Yesterday, she had only checked in. Today, she went straight to the point. "Elena, we are building a new data coordination platform. We need someone to design the brain of the system. I want you to lead the technology team and build something no one can take away from its creator. If you are ready, we can talk this week." I read the email 3 times. No excuses, no power plays, no manipulation, only genuine respect. My phone rang. It was Linda. "Elena, the system is stable. I just reviewed the report. NorthPeak owes you a tremendous thank you. We would like you to consider returning to your former position, with higher authority and full control over rebuilding the technical division." I sat down. This afternoon, they suspended Graham. Now they offered what I should have received years ago. Linda waited for my answer. I said softly, I know the offer is sincere, but I think my journey with North Peak needs to end here. Linda was silent for a few seconds before sighing. I understand, but I hope you know there will always be a place for you here. I thanked her and ended the call. I looked out the window. The Denver skyline glowed like a vast data network, streets weaving into each other like lines of code, ordered, intentional, unbroken, just like me. I opened my laptop and began drafting my reply to Ava. For the first time in months, my hands did not tremble. No anger, no bitterness, only the clarity of someone who had finally recognized the direction she was meant to take. Ava, I am ready. When do we begin? When I pressed send, it felt like closing a door that had rotted long ago and opening another entirely new one, where AstraCore would no longer be something they dismissed, but the foundation I would continue to build exactly the way it deserved. And this time, no one would ever take it from me again.